Hey friends, SGT here, and with silver and gold on the move, as our good friend Bill Murphy from GATA suggested would happen in August, I wanted to get someone special on the line who we've never spoken with before. It's goldmoney.com's head of research, Alasdair Macleod. Alasdair, welcome.
Hello, Sean.
Alasdair, it's just a pleasure to have you here today. Why don't we lead off with what we're seeing in the gold and silver space? Bill Murphy of GATA, I did an interview with him on July 19th, and Bill predicted this, saying that his London source said that big moves were coming in both gold and silver in the month of August. What's your take on what we're seeing?
My immediate take is that isn't Bill well informed? I mean, it's absolutely spot on. And the market feels to me like there is an enormous bear squeeze going on in silver. I mean, what is interesting is that the open interest on COMEX actually bottomed out in December last year, and since then has been climbing. But if you look at the positions that everybody's, sort of got, as it were, they have been running down their positions against that background. There was a spike with managed money. Managed money in about March spiked up to roughly half the maximum that we've seen in the last 3 years, around about 25,000, 30,000 contracts. But since then, it's just, everybody has lost hope that silver is going to rise. And that, to me, is the condition that you really need for a bear squeeze to arise. And that I think, basically is what's happening. Where on earth they're going to get the stock from, I really don't know. It just feels very, very squeezy to me.
Let me read a passage to you from a post that I put up on SGT Report recently, and I want you to focus on the date for us and tell us what it means to you, sir. With the European Union staring at the edge of the September 12th abyss, and big guns like Jacob Rothschild and his minion George Soros and John Paulson literally betting on a collapse, people may be starting to wake up to the cold, harsh reality of the potential nightmares we face. Tell us about that September 12th German deadline.
Yes, I mean that's a very interesting question, Sean, because the guy who's bringing the case up before the German Constitutional Court is a guy called Markus Kerber, and funnily enough, I interviewed him for a podcast for Gold Money last week. And I found the whole thing really quite interesting because there are actually two cases going on. You've got that one which I've just mentioned, but also there's one before the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg, which is being brought by an Irish Member of Parliament. And the ranking of the two courts are such that the German Constitutional Court has to defer to the European Court of Justice. So on September the 12th, because the ECG case will not have been heard, I think that it's quite likely the German Constitutional Court will defer its judgment until the European Court of Justice has ruled. So I think the idea that we're going to get a sort of clear-cut answer out of the Constitutional Court on September the 12th, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's probably going to be deferred because of that case brought by the Irish MP before the ECJ in Luxembourg. So that's the immediate thing. But the background to it is actually very interesting. The last case that was brought up was about a year ago, and at that time, what was presented to the court was that the Maastricht Treaty basically meant that countries couldn't run a GDP deficit of greater than 3%. They couldn't run government borrowings in excess of 60% of GDP. And that, in effect, works as a no bailout clause. Now, it doesn't specifically say it's a no bailout clause, but that's effectively how it works. And so the court had to consider the situation that the cost to the German taxpayer at that stage was about 170 billion euros. The court, in a sort of slightly weasel way, got out of the problem by saying, well, 170 billion euros is not economically disruptive to Germany. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. I don't think that was the court's exact words. Now, this time, Professor Kerber tells me that the evidence before the court are that Germany is in for 2 trillion so far, and there's a further 1.7 trillion in the pipeline. So in a year, we've gone from 170 billion when the court said, this is not going to destabilize the German economy, and so we're going to turn a blind eye to this. So we've gone from 170 billion to 3.7 trillion, which is what is going to be presented before it on September the 12th. And I think the politics behind it is interesting. I mean, if we just put on one side for a moment the possibility that the court will defer judgment until the ECJ in Luxembourg has ruled, I think that the politicians in Germany are probably wanting an out, because remember that next year there is a general election in Germany. I think it's in the second half of next year. But as we run up to this is now everybody's worry in Germany. How much money are we being asked to put up to bail out the rest of Europe? And the answer I got from a German economist who is resident in Madrid, so he's really, he sees both ends of this. He reckons that the cost to Germany is 4 times Germany's tax revenue. Now, if you think about that, we're really, what these turkeys are being asked to vote for, it's the equivalent of a tax Christmas, and that is that they're voting for taxes to bail out the EuroZone, which are the equivalent of all their income plus something on top. Now, how on earth do you go to an electorate as a politician and say, this is the deal, folks, we're going to tax you, we're going to take all your money completely, and then we're going to take some on top, and then we will be good citizens in the EuroZone? I'm sorry, this is something which is just completely intractable. There is no solution to it. And I suspect that the politicians in Germany, if they've got any sense, and they're no fools, I must say, I think they'll probably grab this as a little bit of a lifeline. So it is very interesting. And I think the answer to your question is we watch this September the 12th judgment with very, very close interest.
And the implication is that whether or not it's September 12th that the German politicians finally balk, or sometime in the fall, the implication is that if Germany is unwilling to bail out the entire EuroZone, the EuroZone will collapse. And maybe that's why we see Jacob Rothschild recently betting approximately $200 million that the euro will fail. What's your take on that? What is Rothschild doing? Hedging his bets?
If that report is correct, then yes, no, I think it makes sense, because the Rothschilds have enormous interest in Europe, obviously, as indeed a lot of financial entities in London do. And of course they're covering. I think you're seeing a number of very, very big names beginning to change their whole approach to investment in Europe. I think Shell are trying to there was a report a little while ago that Shell are trying to reduce their cash balances, their exposure to the euro. AIG is another one, which has tried to wind down its European interests. For the Rothschild Investment Trust, which is what the report was about, to do this sounds to me to be entirely prudent and sensible. But these aren't going to be the only people. I think there's a general sort of, the smart money, as it were, is now beginning to realize that it doesn't matter what the Keynesians say, this is a bum deal. We've got to get out of here. And I think that's really what we're seeing. We're going to see more of it, I think, in the coming weeks.
Well, what country are you in as we record this call?
I am in the west coast of England, most delightful place. And you have to remind yourself, or at least I have to remind myself occasionally, we're not immune from the problems to the east of us by, well, not very far. In fact, France is directly south of us.
As you sit offshore and look at what's happening here in the country in which I reside, the United States, we see an unfolding tyranny in the domestic shores here. We see the TSA, we see the DHS, we see purchase orders for ammunition being made by all branches of government for all sorts of nefarious reasons. What do you see as somebody who's offshore looking back at this formerly free nation known as the United States of America? What's your take?
I've seen this report about the social services or something ordering huge, great numbers of dum-dum bullets. I mean, these are against the Geneva Convention. If this is true,
Yes, you're right. The hollow point ammunition. It's completely the army can't even use hollow point, is my understanding.
And you only use that. I mean, you would use that against game, basically. Soft-nosed bullets, same thing. And the idea is that it immobilizes what you shoot on the basis that if you don't kill it with one shot, then you kill it with the next one. I hope this is not true, but it sounds to me to be, oh dear, the worst sort of status behavior that one could possibly imagine. I'm sure it's not true. It can't be true, can it?
Well, unfortunately, all signs point to it being true, that the DHS is arming itself with ammunition, as are other branches of government. But to get to the second point of my question, what do you make of a fall collapse? Because if we see a worldwide economic collapse happen here in the fall or early winter, that may be why the powers that be in this country are arming themselves. They're planning for the collapse.
Well, obviously, the conclusion one jumps to, quite naturally, is that there's going to be sort of trouble in the streets and all the rest of it. Let's see what happens before we jump to that conclusion. What I would say is that the way in which all countries are going with their fiat currencies is they're destroying their fiat currencies as a result of policies trying to keep the show on the road. Now, when you start destroying a fiat currency, we have no idea of what the timing of that destruction is. The one thing I'm beginning to be quite certain of is that the opportunity to back out of policies which lead to the destruction of fiat currencies are very limited, and I can't see how that's going to happen. I could see a scenario, perhaps, where the euro destroyed itself first.
Thanks for watching Part 1. Don't miss Part 2.